At the end of their book, Resurrecting Excellence, Greg Jones and Kevin Armstrong tell the story of a missionary couple that served in Africa. And after several decades there on the field, the wife was diagnosed with an advanced form of cancer. She and her husband were given by their mission sending agency the opportunity to come back to the United States where she could receive quality care and treatment. But instead, that couple decided to stay on the field in Africa. And as she grew closer and closer to her death, she made one request of her husband. Her body was to be buried in the United States, but she desired that her heart should remain in Africa. So upon her death, her heart was placed in a box and was buried in a serene little spot overlooking the town and all of the many villages that they had served for so long. They had lived so much of their life amongst the people of that town and area that her heart seemed to belong more to the people of that part of Africa than it did to the place where she was from in the United States. Now, it seems to me that sentiment is far too uncommon amongst American pastors today. For decades now, American pastors have too often viewed each church that they serve as just another stepping stone to something bigger and better as they build a ministry career and resumes for themselves. And as a result, churches are only briefly served by a pastor, 3, 5, sometimes 7 years at a maximum. And in such short spans of time, pastors, they seldom have a chance to develop a deep sense of love for the congregation. And in turn, congregations seldom receive from their pastors the deep sacrificial love that gives expression for that congregation through the pastor of the love of Jesus for those people. And Pastor Paul, though he traveled far and wide planting churches, also spent lengthy spats of his time serving some of those churches like the one in the city of Thessalonica that we've been talking about in these videos. And to the Thessalonian Christians, Paul wrote, "You know how we lived among you for your sake." And Paul lived amongst the Thessalonians in such a way that he came to know them and he lived with them and he lived with them for their sake. He wanted the Thessalonian church to experience through him the love with which Jesus loved them. Growing up in the United Methodist Church in West Virginia, I did not have a lot of interaction with missionaries, and that all changed when I became the lead pastor at GCF, a church that has a lot of missionary affiliations. I remember one Sunday after church sharing lunch at Fiesta, Mexico with a missionary family that was serving in Nepal that was visiting GCF that Sunday. And serving in Nepal sounded so exotic and exciting to me that I could hardly wait to ask them to tell me what a typical day was like living as a missionary in Nepal. And I didn't know exactly what I expected. Maybe some stories of lame men walking, of blind women seeing, and people just falling on their knees left and right every day, declaring Jesus to be their Lord. Maybe I expected some harrowing stories of resistance to their ministry and even a few tense encounters when they were maybe just on the cusp or the verge of martyrdom as servants of Jesus. Well, instead, the fellow described for me days that were not so unlike mine as a pastor in Wilmore, except that they were living out their days amongst the Nepalese people, preparing teachings, directing ministries, visiting the sick, counseling the troubled, going to market, and I'll never forget him recounting long walks back and forth to the post office. So you see, I have learned that there is not a vast fundamental difference between pastors and missionaries. Both pastors and missionaries, we move to towns or cities that are not our own. We take up our calling in a particular congregation and live amongst the people of that church and in that town, and we do so for their sake. So as your pastor, we shop at IGA, buy our stamps from Angie at the post office, chat with John in the MedSave pharmacy, pick up takeout at Subway or at Great Wall. We drink coffee at Drinklings, eat breakfast at Solomon's Porch, fill up our tanks at Cluckers, and spend our days growing to love Wilmore more and more. And all the while, as we live amongst you, we seek to be for you a tangible expression of the self-sacrificing, undying love of Jesus. GCF, I've said this to you before, and it remains my conviction to this day, even though I haven't said it in a while. You are not a stepping stone for me to something bigger and better. As I live among you, I hope that you can see in me over the long term something of the depth of the love of Jesus.